people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. This Saturday, on what is Ben Whittaker's Matchroom debut, on the undercard, we're going to be seeing UFC import Molly McCann attempt to advance to a professional record of 2-0 in what will be her second fight since migrating from MMA over to boxing. And she will be facing Ebony Cotton, who's 1-0, like Molly's 1-0, so at least on paper, Ebony is about as experienced in the paid ranks as Molly is. Granted that Molly has all that MMA experience in the UFC, the hope is that some of that will carry over. They would have matched Molly against someone she stands a decent enough chance of beating at this very early stage in a fighter's career. It's about amassing experience while mitigating risks.
Rounds in the bank.
I actually took in Molly McCann's pro debut this past September, and being honest, while she was rough around the edges, which you would expect from an MMA fighter coming into boxing, I liked what I saw, that she's physically strong, aggressive, which makes her an entertaining fighter. You can't ask her to be perfect.
Nobody is.
There are far more experienced professionals in the paid ranks that have that which they need to work on, to where you can't ask Molly to be perfect, but you can.
Nobody's perfect.
And she doesn't have to be, so long as she is capable, and so long as she is able to put on a show, so long as she is entertaining, that really is what matters most. And having seen Molly McCann's pro debut, she was fun to watch. It was entertaining, a bit rough around the edges, but still good entertainment. This fight is scheduled for 6 rounds in the women's super bantamweight division. Super bantamweight, that is where Ellie Scottney reigns as unified champion, and that is also where Mexico's own Mayeli Flores holds the WBA title. That is where this fight is taking place and where Molly campaigns. Now, I don't think that Molly is on a collision course with any of those fighters, because by the time that she's ready to fight for a title, those fighters may have moved on.
Moved up.
The fight this weekend will be Molly McCann's second professional boxing match this year, and I would give her another year and a half, before she fights for a title. I would like to see Molly McCann, provided she's successful this weekend, fight at least 4 times in the coming calendar year. That by the end of next year, she should be about 6-0. More if they can.
Yeah, get her more fights, more experience if they can.
Molly is 35 years old, just starting out.
And that's up there in age to start a pro boxing career, so she doesn't have the luxury of time, meaning they need to move fast. In the coming calendar year, if they can get her 4 or 5 fights, they need to.
Wherever Matchroom is doing a show, Molly should be somewhere on the undercard, maybe on the prelim card. The saving grace for Molly is that they can do this, and her opponents at this early stage will be relatively inexpensive. So if Matchroom is doing a show somewhere in the United States, you can put Molly on the prelim show. If they're doing a show in the UK, if they're doing a show in Australia, in Mexico, as Matchroom does shows in several different regions, wherever they're doing a show, it might be a good idea to put Molly on the prelim card. Let her get that experience, the native Liverpudlian.
All the things I've done in my career. Dial it down, Tony Bellew.
But that's what they should do. The super bantamweight division is a densely populated weight class with a lot of really good fighters in it, and that can be a gift and a curse depending on where you are with your boxing. You're gonna have plenty of people to fight. Good people. That is where unbeaten up-and-comer Johanna Wanyu campaigns, Micaiah Kreps campaigns,
Australia's own Sky Nicholson,
Puerto Rico's own Ashley Ann Lozada, very impressive fighter that I came across the other day. This is a deep division. Molly McCann is coming into it at a very opportune time because we're already on the eve of the undisputed title fight between Ellie Scottney and Mayeli Flores. And if Ellie wins, I anticipate that she's probably going to move up and vacate all the titles she wins, at which point
Molly can shoot for one. She is coming into this weight class at a very opportune time, though, like I said, it's not without its perils. There are a lot of good fighters at 122. Look for the ring return of Molly McCann this weekend on the undercard of Ben Whittaker's Matchroom debut.
In men's super middleweight news, for the first time in 7 years, former undisputed champion Canelo Alvarez is not featured anywhere in Ring Magazine's top pound for pound, which might seem a sensible decision to some, to exclude him from the list, that he's now coming off a loss and how he looked with Terence Crawford quite limited. It might make sense to some individuals that Canelo Alvarez isn't there. And the list itself is more or less a solid list. It's one of the more solid Ring Magazine pound for pound lists I've ever seen. Sensible for the most part, if not for one inconsistency. Former undisputed champion Artur Beterbiev, who's currently coming off the loss to Dmitry Bivol in what was their rematch, is currently ranked at number 6, where Canelo Alvarez is not ranked at all. What they have in common, they were both undisputed champions before their last fights. They are now both coming off of losses, but Artur is still on the list and Canelo isn't. So why is Artur getting more consideration than a fighter who's more accomplished than he is at more weights and over a longer duration of time? But didn't you take Canelo Alvarez off of your list?
I did. As the governing rule is, no fighter coming right off a loss and absent of a world title is allowed to maintain a rank. The list is only for winners and only for reigning champions. But that rule applies across the board. It doesn't just apply to Canelo, it applied to Artur as well when I took him out.
That's called consistency.
Highlighting the inconsistency in Ring Magazine's rank standings. If it's all right to keep Artur there after a loss, why isn't it all right to keep Canelo there after a loss? He's done more in the sport than Artur Beterbiev. He has a better resume than Artur Beterbiev.
Now, as I've often highlighted over the years, the difference between Ring Magazine's pound for pound list and mine is that Ring Magazine's pound for pound list is governed by a voting panel, in many ways making it a popularity contest. Whoever gets the most votes rises to the top, whereas my list is different. It's got a governing criterion. It's not based on the collective sentiments of a panel so much as a governing criterion.
What can Canelo Alvarez do to get back on?
Well, per Boxeo Azteca, the wheels are in motion to do a rematch between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford in the coming calendar year. When that rematch is supposed to happen, I really don't know, but one could guess that it might land in May. When Canelo Alvarez normally fights, Cinco de Mayo weekend.
That is subject to some debate as when and where Canelo Alvarez fights Terence again, if he does fight him again, would likely be dictated by who's putting the money up, who's paying for the fight, and what platform is going to carry it. But if history is any indicator of things to come, that rematch might land in May. And if it does, and Canelo wins, I think that would be enough to get him back on Ring Magazine's pound for pound list. It would be enough to get him back on mine. It's just a question of where.
Now, it's important to note that most people don't actually like Canelo's chances in a second fight with Terence Crawford. They just don't see a way for him to win. What he needs to improve upon,
that he needs to do a better job of keeping up with and keeping on Terence Crawford, cutting off the ring, being busier with his combinations within a round, as to not give those rounds away, looking for single shots,
loading up his punches to add power to them, though in effect losing a half a second in doing so, making him noticeably slower than Terence Crawford in pursuit of power.
What he needs to fix, people don't think he can fix. At this advanced stage in his career, and at this age, even though he is several years younger than Terence, he has a lot more miles on the odometer than Terence. More fights, more rounds in the bank, more wear and tear. People don't have the confidence in Canelo that he can win that rematch. But if by some chance he did, that would be enough to get him back on Ring Magazine's pound for pound list, my pound for pound list.
It's not the only way he could get back on, but it's one way. Perhaps the strongest statement would be avenging the loss to Terence Crawford, but alternatively, picking up an alphabet title, at least for my list, would be enough to get him back on.
Who's he going to pick up an alphabet title from? Terence still has them all.
We're just hypothesizing. What if Terence Crawford decided to retire tomorrow, vacating all the titles that he won, if Canelo Alvarez were able to pick one of them up against the top contender? Well, that would be enough to get him back on. Not the strongest statement, but it would do, at least for my list.
That would show that to some degree, Canelo Alvarez still has it. Even if it's not enough to beat Terence, it is still enough to compete at the top level. It would still be enough that he's still one of the best fighters in the sport, pound for pound, if he were able to do that against a Christian Mabili, a Diego Pacheco, a Hamza Shiraz, these unbeaten top contenders.
In many ways, the titles are an earmark for where a fighter is. Now, I understand that not all world champions are created equal. Some are clearly better than others, light years ahead of others. But the reason that world titles are an earmark for where a fighter is because what if I told you that you got a fighter who can't win a world title from anybody at his weight or anybody at the neighboring weights?
What kind of message does that send?
If I tell you that there's this guy, but he's not good enough to win a title from anybody at his weight or the neighboring weights, well, that would hardly make him a pound-for-pound fighter, right?
Right.
Alternatively, what if I told you there's a guy at this weight who can beat everybody at his own weight and everybody upstairs at the neighboring weight? What would that say about that guy? And what if the guy actually did it?
Are you talking about Usyk?
I'm talking about pound for pound. That's the message that would get across if I told you there's a guy who can beat every champion at his own weight and the neighboring weight. And in that way, that's how the alphabet titles are an earmark for where a fighter is. And so not having one bars you from the Ring IQ pound for pound list until such a time as you prove you've still got it and you can pick one up and you can still compete at that level. Canelo not having one right now.
You see the logic.
Now, of course, it's not just picking up an alphabet title. There are other qualifying factors to then take into consideration, but to just get considered,
To even get looked at.
which doesn't mean you're going to get in, but to even be in the conversation, at the very minimum, you need to have an alphabet title. You need to be able to win one.
Because what kind of fighter are you if you can't?
Not pound for pound. Now, I don't actually like Canelo Alvarez's chances against Terence Crawford in a rematch. Nobody's expecting him to win. And for the first time in a long time, Canelo would go into a fight as the betting underdog, making the victory that much sweeter if he were to win.
When's the last time Canelo wasn't the favorite with the bookies?
In many ways, a rematch between them, between Canelo and Terence, is the most sensible fight to make because it's the fight worth the most money. And it's not that I care about their money or their bank accounts, it's that they do.
Given their ages, that's what they're going to prioritize, setting themselves up for retirement with the right fights for the right money. I don't actually want to see a rematch, but they might, given what it might pay out.
For them, it is the most sensible decision, even if some people don't want it, kind of like how nobody likes going to the dentist, but you have to, as it's the sensible thing to do.
You don't want to have to file your taxes, but you have to, because it's the sensible thing to do. That applies here to these two fighters.
And now it's time for another installment of what is fast becoming the most popular segment here on the channel, Ring IQ Hate Mail! Guy who goes by the name Roman Gabriel reacted to my previous video detailing David Benavidez ducking Artur Beterbiev and ducking Dmitry Bivol for a fight against the lesser fighter, Inzerto Ramirez, by saying, I hope he does keep collecting belts, comes back down when Beterbiev is actually healthy, which is never, and destroys him. Yard damn near knocked out your boy and couldn't even touch Benavidez.
Yeah, maybe his recollection of that fight is different from mine. When the fuck was Anthony Yard on the verge of knocking out Artur? Did I miss it?
And never mind the so obvious triangle theory he's using to prop up David. You know that David doing better against Anthony doesn't necessarily carry over to a Beterbiev fight.
Do you want to tell him or should I?
The version of Anthony Yard that David Benavidez fought had already been knocked out by Sergey Kovalev and already been knocked out by Artur Beterbiev, had already lost to Lyndon Arthur. So David coming in after them.
Do you want to tell him or should I?
To be a David Benavidez fan, that's what you have to do. You have to often deal in hypotheticals. Look at what he led with. I hope.
You have to.
To be a David Benavidez fan, you have to hope. You have to wish. You have to deal in the if and the maybe.
The hypotheticals.
To fill the void for all the things he's not doing because he's not fighting Artur, and he's not fighting Dmitry Bivol. Like when he didn't unify the super middleweight division even though he was there for over a decade throughout 2.5 cycles of world champions.
None of which he fought. None of which he unified with. Didn't fight George Groves, didn't fight James DeGale, didn't fight Jose Uzcategui, didn't fight Callum Smith.
Didn't fight Billy Joe, and he didn't fight Caleb Plant, not when Caleb had a belt. No, he waited good up until Canelo knocked him out.
Then he fought him. But by then it wasn't a unification match because Caleb didn't have a belt, and neither did David.
Making it all the more hilarious when Roman Gabriel says, unlike Beterbiev and Bivol, which would have never fought each other if they didn't have ridiculous money, Benavidez ducks no one.
He just stuck to both of them.
And he will come back to collect the scalps and shut up all these fake experts, never fought a day in their lives.
Hey, I didn't need to be an expert to know that David Benavidez's light heavyweight campaign would come and go without a Bivol fight and without a Beterbiev fight.
I said that shit a year ago. All without being an expert, I could see it coming. And you know why?
Why?
Because David is a fucking ducker. That's why. He ducked all the real smoke at 168 for years. That's why he didn't unify with anybody. And he's doing the same thing now at 175. To fight a guy that Dmitry Bivol beat already? So when you and Zerto were both at 168 and you both had titles and you were both unbeaten, why didn't you try this hard to fight him then?
Because he was unbeaten. It wasn't safe. It's the same thing he did with Caleb. He wasn't in any hurry to fight Caleb while he was an unbeaten champion. It's not until after Canelo knocks him out that David and his team thought it was safe.
And they're doing that now with Zerto, who they didn't think it was safe to fight until Dmitry took him to school, until Dmitry beat him. Then all of a sudden, that's the most important fight for David.
More important than fighting the guy who beat him?
Apparently more important, and more important than fighting for Undisputed. David Benavidez's light heavyweight campaign lasted a grand total of 3 fights. And if you think a guy who walks around at 2 and change, who's gonna fight at cruiser in his next fight, is going to then drop back down to light heavyweight after that, well then you're fucking dumber than you look.
You already sounded fucking dumb.
'Tis better to remain silent as to avoid sounding stupid than to open one's mouth and remove all doubts.
Like you just did. You're talking about experts and you're talking about people that may or may not have fought before when you don't need to be any of those things to know that David's not likely to return to light heavyweight. If only 3 fights into that campaign, he decided to move up.
Well, you can't read in between the lines? Are you fucking stupid or something?
Stop asking him rhetorical questions. We already know what he is. He must be stupid if he thinks a guy who's set to fight at cruiserweight is gonna then move back down. In effect, cutting 25 pounds.
More than 25. David walks around at well over 200.
No, I'm not the expert, and I never said I was. But you definitely ain't saying stupid shit like that.
You ain't no fucking expert. You can't be no fighter. As your average fighter would know, it's not likely that David going up to cruiser, he drops back down to light heavy.
So miss me with the bullshit. You're just another overzealous fanboy who's overexcited because he beat a guy everybody expected him to beat, myself included.
And the bookies.
Enamored with a fighter for the same old fanboy shit because you either share a common ancestry or he lived close to your house.
Who fucking cares?